Elaine was his mother. Liam was her only son, and Rachel, the woman caught on camera dumping Elaine's pills, was the daughter-in-law she once called family. In court, they sat together while Elaine stood alone. She had funded their home, nursed their child, and trusted their promises. Now, all she had was evidence and a judge ready to listen. She smiled and said, "I forgot again." But it was her hand that emptied the bottle. Elaine stood in front of the open medicine cabinet, her hands trembling, not from age, but from something more visceral. A knot tightened in her chest as her eyes scanned the shelf, then the drawer, then the counter. The bottle of her blood pressure medication, her daily necessity, was gone. Again. "Maybe you took it twice this morning?" Rachel's voice was sugar-laced, clipped at the edges like a curtain hiding rot. She stood in the hallway with a mug in hand, leaning against the doorframe in her lemon-yellow robe, watching Elaine as if she were a toddler playing house. "You've been so forgetful lately." Elaine blinked at her, the silence thick as steam. "No," she said evenly. "I always count, I always check." Rachel's smile twitched. "Well, it's probably around here somewhere. I'll help you look after breakfast." But she didn't. She never did. Elaine stood still long after Rachel walked away, listening to the clink of ceramic mugs in the kitchen, the hum of the coffee grinder, and the distant, muffled laugh that came only when Liam was home. Her son, her only child, had become an echo of someone she once raised with warmth. Now he echoed someone else's tone. That night, when the house went quiet and the hallway lights dimmed to a soft amber glow, Elaine opened the drawer beneath her bed. From inside, she pulled out a small black box she hadn't touched in years. Inside, a hidden camera, the kind her brother once used in his antique shop to catch dishonest customers. It still worked. She didn't sleep that night, not really. Instead, she waited until the morning light crept through the blinds. While Rachel went on her morning walk, yoga mat in hand and earbuds in, Elaine placed the camera discreetly inside the linen closet with a clean line of sight to the hallway and cabinet. She angled it just above the shelf where her pills rested, now in a new bottle she had hidden behind cold compresses and gauze. Then she waited. Every sound became a possible clue, every creak in the hallway a cue. She took her meds privately now, counting each pill under her breath, clicking each lid shut like a ritual. She said nothing, smiled at dinner, even when Rachel patronized her in front of Liam, joking about Mom's little slips and pouring her water like she was made of glass. But Elaine was not glass. She was stone, weathered, cracked, but never broken. A week passed. Then it happened. Elaine rewound the footage with shaking fingers late at night. Her reading glasses slipped low on her nose as she squinted at the grainy grayscale screen. There, at exactly 3:17 p.m., Rachel entered the hallway while Elaine napped in her sunroom. She looked around once, then again. Her movements were casual, practiced. Her hand reached into the cabinet, pulled out the bottle. She twisted the lid, and then, without hesitation, she walked to the trash bin, lifted the lid, and tossed the pills behind it, letting them fall between the bin and the wall. Elaine paused the video. The breath she didn't realize she'd been holding came out in a sharp, dry exhale. In that moment, everything aligned. The misplaced medicine, the syrupy tone, the way Rachel insisted on reminding Liam how fragile his mother was, the unsubtle brochures that kept appearing, top 10 assisted living communities near you, and more. Than anything, the smugness masked as concern, the weaponized sweetness. Elaine leaned back, the low hum of the monitor casting a pale glow on her lined face. She reached for her notebook, the one she had labeled months ago when things had begun to shift. "Document everything," it read in bold red letters. She flipped to a clean page and began to write. Later that night, while Rachel laughed at something on her phone and Liam scrolled in silence beside her, Elaine stepped outside under the stars, feeling the cold cut her skin with clarity. In her pocket was a flash drive. In her mind, a single line kept replaying. "Maybe you took it twice." "No, dear, you took it, and you'll give it all back." The next morning, Rachel found Elaine unusually cheerful. She didn't notice the hidden camera was gone, but across town in a small gray office lined with diplomas and sealed files, an elder care attorney slipped the flash drive into a desktop port and watched Rachel toss away the pills in slow motion. He leaned back, tapped his pen against the desk, and muttered, "Looks like we've got a case." Rachel served tea with too much honey and far too much control. The tea was warm, sweet, and smelled faintly of jasmine, but Elaine didn't drink it. Not because she feared it was poisoned. No, that would have required more subtlety than Rachel was capable of. Instead, she left it untouched because it reeked of performance. Every stir of the spoon, every napkin neatly folded beside the cup, was another stage cue in Rachel's little play. I added a touch of manuka, Rachel chirped, placing the porcelain cup a bit too close to Elaine's elbow. It's supposed to be good for immunity. At your age, we need to think about those things, right? Elaine smiled, the kind of smile that doesn't rise past the lips. Kind of you, she murmured without touching the cup. Rachel leaned in, her tone feather soft. Did you find your keys, by the way? You seem flustered this morning. Elaine nodded slowly, rehearsed. They were in the laundry, I think. She knew exactly where they'd been, tucked inside the pantry cabinet behind the flour tin. She hadn't put them there. Later that day, Rachel cut Elaine's chicken into small, uneven chunks. The sound of the knife on porcelain scraped against Elaine's nerves. There we go, Rachel said, sliding the plate toward her like a nurse feeding a toddler. Don't want to chip a tooth. You always forget your dentures when you nap. Elaine had never worn dentures in her life. Liam, across the table, didn't look up from his phone. She's just trying to help, Mom. Elaine said nothing. She was beginning to master the art of silence, using it not to retreat, but to sharpen her focus, to document, to collect. That night, she pretended to misplace her reading glasses, stumbled once on the step to the hallway, asked Rachel the same question twice, watched her reactions like a hawk in a cardigan. The sweetness crumbled fast. Rachel sighed loudly after each repeated question, tossed a dish rag onto the counter with exaggerated flair. One time she muttered under her breath, God help us if this turns into diapers. Elaine heard every word. She waited until midnight to enter the study. Carefully, methodically, she opened the locked file drawer where Rachel now kept household documents. She wasn't sure what she was looking for, but she knew if someone was plotting against her mind, they'd likely start it on paper. There, buried between old utility bills and furniture warranties, she found it. Her medical file. At first, she thought it was a duplicate, but the date of her last appointment had been altered, her blood pressure reading falsified. In the notes section, someone had scribbled, episodes of confusion, monitor closely. Her chest tightened. She returned the file without a sound, locked the drawer, and walked away with fire blooming behind her eyes. By morning, the play resumed. Rachel laid out her vitamins in a little ceramic bowl next to a fresh smoothie and scrambled eggs. Thought I'd help you with your morning routine, she said brightly. Your memory's been, well, a little spotty. Elaine tilted her head. Is it? I wouldn't know. Rachel chuckled. That's kind of the point, isn't it? Elaine smiled again, tight, cold. It is. When the mail came, Elaine sorted through it slowly. Catalogs, bills, junk. Her fingers paused. A thick envelope, glossy and colorful. Lakeside Elder Care Community. On the front, a tagline, because comfort shouldn't be confusing. Her name was printed neatly under the window. Elaine walked to the sunroom, sat down in the light, and slowly opened the brochure. Inside were pamphlets about memory wings, meal plans, shared rooms, and transitional housing. There was even a sticky note attached. Rachel thought you might like this. Love, Liam. Elaine didn't react, not right away. But that evening, when Rachel called from the hallway, need help with your slippers again? Elaine responded with deliberate calm, No, dear, I remember exactly where I left them. And she did. Right next to the second hidden camera she'd just installed behind the bookshelf. They wanted me to feel small in the house I made possible. The click was subtle. Elaine twisted the brass handle on the pantry door again, gently, then harder. The key she'd used every morning for years, since the day she helped stock those shelves after escrow, refused to turn. She stared at the lock like it had personally betrayed her. Need help with that? Rachel's voice floated from the living room like a balloon full of acid. Elaine turned, cool and even. Is the lock changed? Rachel shrugged from the couch, one leg draped over the other like she owned the air. Liam thought it was safer that way, to keep things organized. Don't worry, we'll label your section. Elaine didn't speak. She walked away slowly, each step a thread snapping in her chest. Later that day, while pretending to nap on the sunroom recliner, Elaine overheard Rachel talking to a friend on the phone. Laughter, wine clinks, and then, "She's basically a guest who overstayed. Once we get the medical thing documented, we can talk about assisted living options, guilt-free." Guest, the word echoed like a hammer striking porcelain. She could still hear it when she retreated to her bedroom and opened the old mahogany chest at the foot of her bed. Inside were mementos, photos, her wedding veil, and beneath a blue velvet pouch, a ring box. Empty. She had sold it 4 years ago, her wedding ring, a white gold solitaire her late husband had chosen, with trembling fingers and soft eyes. She'd pawned it quietly, no announcement, no dramatics, to scrape together the last $40,000 for Liam and Rachel's down payment when the bank threatened foreclosure. Rachel had cried with gratitude then. Liam had hugged her for 5 full seconds. Now, she needed a label on the pantry just to get cereal. Elaine stood and pulled out the accordion file she'd kept buried beneath the winter linens, original mortgage statements, wire transfer receipts, co-signed documentation of her 80% financial contribution, each one carefully dated and initialed. She slid them into a tote bag, grabbed her coat, and made the 10-minute walk to the UPS store. "Hi," she told the young clerk, her voice calm but low. "I need a new off-site safety box, something not connected to this address." The kid blinked. "Like a private mailbox?" Elaine smiled. "Yes, and a copy of everything I hand you. 2 sets, color." Back at the house, Rachel and Liam were curled on the couch watching something on Netflix. They barely looked up when she entered. Good. They were comfortable, and comfort, Elaine was learning, made people sloppy. That evening, she slipped into the hallway quietly, past their bedroom, past the laundry, until she heard the whisper of a voice. Rachel again, on the phone. She slips up once. She's out. That's what the caseworker said. All it takes is forgetting the stove again, or a lost wallet, or maybe the car keys going missing. Then we can escalate it. Elaine stood very still. She didn't breathe. She didn't blink. A silent, eerie chill rolled down the corridor, like the house itself knew it was being betrayed. Back in her room, she sat at her vanity and looked at herself. The faint lines, the tired eyes, the wisdom, the fury. A guest in this house? No, she was the foundation beneath their feet, and they had mistaken her silence for surrender. Elaine unlocked her phone with practiced ease and opened the voice memo app, her fingers steady. She didn't speak right away. She waited, listening, making sure the room was still. Then she began recording in a calm, unhurried tone. Timestamps, interactions, tone shifts, small but telling contradictions in Rachel's phrasing. Everything went in. Every moment that might later be denied. She saved the files one by one into a newly created folder she titled with quiet precision, "Quiet Ownership." She paused before locking the screen, catching a glimpse of her reflection in the dark surface of the TV across the room. She studied the woman staring back at her, older, wiser, and no longer afraid. "Let's see who overstays," she whispered to the reflection, her voice barely audible but laced with quiet fire. The following morning arrived crisp and clear. Elaine sat at the kitchen table sipping her tea, perfectly composed, flipping through the morning paper she had no intention of reading. She was already dressed, her hair brushed back, her expression unreadable. Rachel breezed in with her usual faux sweet cheer, already halfway past the table, when she dropped the comment, "Oh, we may have a home evaluator coming by next week, just a heads up. Try not to stress, okay?" She offered it with a casual smile, the kind that didn't reach her eyes, and vanished into the hallway. Elaine gave a faint, nonchalant nod, smiling just enough to seem polite. "Of course," she said gently. But under the table, her hand was clenched around a manila folder. Inside were full copies of the property deed, every clause underlined, every page signed and certified. It had her name right beside Liam's. Legal, binding, indisputable. And her eyes? They weren't smiling at all. They were wide open. She didn't need to raise her voice anymore. That had once been a temptation. To fight loud, to demand acknowledgement. But now? Now she understood the power of silence paired with irrefutable proof. The footage would do the screaming for her. That afternoon, Elaine climbed the short steps to her garden unit and closed the door behind her. She moved with quiet purpose to the shelf near her reading chair. From her pocket, she removed a small device. no larger than a coat button, matte black, nearly invisible once in place. She ran her fingers along the ceramic vase she kept on the shelf, gently lifting it. Behind it, in the wooden paneling, was a tiny notch she'd carved carefully the week before, smoothed and hollowed just enough to nestle the lens. With practiced calm, she pressed the camera into the space. The green indicator blinked once, then silence. It was motion activated, with audio, synced to a private cloud account under a pseudonym even Liam wouldn't recognize. Encrypted, off-site, untraceable, this was the third camera she'd installed. The first time, her hands had trembled, her breath uneven, her heart pounding with fear and guilt. Not anymore. Something had changed since then. Something inside her had hardened, not cruelly, but unshakably. She no longer felt like prey. She wasn't simply surviving now, she was documenting. She was proof. She was evidence. Down the hallway, Rachel's laughter rang out. Too loud, too sugar slick. Elaine stepped back just in time to see her pass the door, phone in hand. I know, Rachel giggled to someone on the other end. But the woman thinks a calendar means independence. She can't even remember if she took her pills. A pause, then the words that snapped something cold into Elaine's spine. Let her skip a dose or two. It'll teach her. Elaine stood frozen. Her breath slowed to a long, controlled inhale. Her hands didn't shake, her pulse didn't spike. But her smile when Rachel peeked in and said, "All good, Mother Elaine," was so calm it made Rachel blink. Elaine nodded. Lovely day. That night she downloaded the clip. Then two more, one of Rachel pulling the battery from the pill organizer, another of her opening Elaine's appointment letter and tossing it in the trash. By the weekend, she had 15 snippets, none longer than a minute, but each razor sharp in truth. She uploaded them onto a flash drive. Then, early Monday morning, she stepped into a modest brick building labeled Sapphire Elder Advocacy and Rights Center. Inside, a receptionist named Janine listened with a practiced calm. Elaine placed the flash drive between them. "I don't want to press charges, not yet. I just want someone watching." Janine looked up at her, and someone is now, starting today. Later that night, back at home, Rachel was in full social media mode. Elaine could hear her in the living room performing with breathy concern on a video call. It's just so hard watching someone fade. You give and give, you try to help, but sometimes it feels like she's, I don't know, just gone. I hate to say it, but she's not the person she used to be. Elaine watched from the kitchen doorway, unseen, her arms crossed, her lips tight. She didn't interrupt. She didn't defend herself. She just memorized the cadence of Rachel's tone, how it trembled at just the right syllable. That night, she updated her camera's angle just in case the story changed again. A few days later, she got a call from Sapphire's case investigator. "We've opened a preliminary review, Ms. Lane," the woman said. "We need you to keep everything exactly the same. Same routines, same silence. The footage will build context. Her patterns will do the rest." Elaine nodded slowly. "You want me to act like nothing's happening?" "We want her to think she's still winning." Elaine looked out the window at Rachel's herb garden, the one she never let Elaine touch. Rosemary, thyme, basil, all green, all hers. For now. She hung up, then walked to the kitchen. "Mornin'," Rachel chirped, dressed in lemon-yellow linen, stirring her turmeric latte. "You're up early." Elaine smiled back. "Just couldn't sleep. I kept thinking of all the things I used to forget." Rachel laughed, not knowing that the punchline was already recorded. That night, Elaine found an envelope on her pillow. No note, no handwriting. Just a glossy pamphlet with bright blue lettering, Silver Pines, Assisted Living, Tranquility Starts Here. Her name was printed on the application, typed "Ready." Elaine folded it once, slid it into her camera folder, and labeled the file Attempted Relocation Documented. They locked the medicine cabinet. I had the keys to everything else. The click echoed louder than it should have. Elaine stood in the hallway, still in her robe, her toothbrush dangling in one hand, watching as Rachel stepped back from the hallway cabinet and casually twirled a small padlock key between her fingers. "Oh," Rachel said, faking surprise. "We had to reorganize. You know how clutter stresses Liam out? The cabinet's locked now, just until we can figure out a safer system." Elaine blinked once. Her blood pressure monitor was inside that cabinet. So was her medication, her name on every label, each prescribed dosage tied to months of vitals logged meticulously, and now locked behind a door she no longer had access to. Rachel didn't wait for a response. She breezed past Elaine, humming under her breath, the sound of her slippered footsteps swallowed by the hallway rug. Elaine returned to her room with the toothbrush still in hand, unbrushed. But her mind was sharp, buzzing now, like the static before a radio tune. She sat on the edge of her bed and opened her drawer. Inside, folded carefully beneath a paperback novel no one in the house had ever noticed her reading, was a manila envelope marked Split Refi 2016. She hadn't looked at them in years. Her fingers were steady now as she pulled the envelope open and slid out the contents: mortgage agreement, notarized co-owner signature, Elaine S. Parker, 60%, Liam R. Parker, 40%. A half smile pulled at her lips. They thought she was locked out of a cabinet? She still owned the house. The next morning, while Rachel was at Pilates and Liam at work, Elaine called the county registrar's office. The woman on the line confirmed what Elaine already knew. Yep, you're still listed as a majority owner on the deed. Active. No transfers filed since the refinance 6 years ago. Elaine jotted it down. Can you mail me a certified copy? Of course. Should arrive within a few days. When she hung up, Elaine didn't celebrate. She simply opened her planner and crossed off one word in red ink: leverage. Then she drove herself to the law offices of Benjamin, Tully, and Ward, where she updated her will, quietly removing Liam from all real estate inheritance. She left his name nowhere, not even a single keepsake. Instead, she allocated her 60% stake into a private trust, one designed to protect elder homeowners from coercion or property abuse. The lawyer, a kind-eyed woman named Julia, studied the documents and murmured, "Smart woman. Most people your age don't think about backup plans. You've just made yourself fireproof." Elaine gave her a faint smile. "That's because I've already walked through the fire." That evening, she returned home to find Rachel in the kitchen boiling water with exaggerated grace. "Oh, you're back," Rachel chirped. "I was going to leave you some ginger tea. Helps with, blood pressure." Elaine poured herself water instead. Rachel watched her, smile thinned. "You've been quiet lately." Elaine didn't blink. "You've been careless lately." Rachel's eyes flickered. "Excuse me." "I saw the lock on my cabinet. I heard the phone call you made Monday, and I've been reading up on co-ownership law." Rachel's expression twitched just slightly, but she recovered. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Maybe you misunderstood," Elaine interrupted. "You've been misusing the word guest for months, but guests don't hold property titles." Rachel's mouth opened and closed once. Then she turned on her heel and left the room without another word. Elaine didn't need her to say anything, not anymore. That night, she paid cash for a burner phone at the gas station 2 towns over. Taped to the back was a sticky note from the clerk with her new number. She programmed only one contact into it: Julia, attorney. Then she placed the phone in a shoebox, tucked it into her closet behind a dusty quilt, and fell asleep that night with her door wedged shut. The next afternoon, while watering the gardenias in the front yard, Elaine paused at the sound of Rachel's voice through the open kitchen window. It was hushed, bitter, frantic. "She won't last long," Rachel snapped. "Soon she won't be our problem." Elaine didn't flinch. She placed the watering can on the soil, her gloved hand trembling just once. Then she reached into her pocket and clicked the voice recorder. It was already running. "They tried to lock me out. I carved out my own corner. The key slid into the lock like it had been waiting for her." Elaine turned it with a slow, deliberate click, then opened the weather-worn door to the garden unit, the modest back portion of the house that once served as Liam's workshop, and, before that, a guest suite. Dust danced in the morning light streaming through the single window, and the scent of cedar storage boxes lingered faintly beneath layers of paint and mildew. It wasn't much, but it was hers now. She stepped inside quietly, her steps purposeful but not rushed, and gently set down a single battered suitcase just inside the threshold. Beside it, she placed a small, faded shoebox marked in her careful handwriting. July 1979, co-ownership docs. The letters had smudged slightly over the decades, but they were still legible, still powerful. Behind her, standing just outside the doorway with respectful silence, was the locksmith, a thin man with salt and pepper hair and a tool belt that jingled faintly every time he shifted his weight. "You want the keypad code private?" he asked without preamble, his voice low and practical. Elaine gave a curt nod. "Only I should know it." He didn't argue, just got to work. In less than 20 minutes, he had installed the new electronic lock and keypad on the front door, tested the code twice to ensure smooth access, and handed her a folded set of instructions with worn hands. She paid him in cash, peeled from a neatly folded envelope, and without hesitation added a generous tip. She walked him out with a polite but distant smile. Once the door clicked shut behind him, she stood still for a moment in the silence, the air thick with lemon-scented cleaning products and a new sense of finality. "Retrofitting independence," she murmured under her breath, not to anyone in particular, just to mark the moment. As dusk fell, Elaine got to work. She scrubbed every surface in the kitchenette until the counters gleamed. She pulled crisp white sheets out of the suitcase and made the narrow twin bed with precision, hospital corners and all. She placed her reading lamp, the one Greg had bought her in '92, beside her armchair, which was now positioned at just the right angle to catch the morning light. A framed photograph of her late husband, Greg, smiling in his navy blazer, was set lovingly on the improvised nightstand. She took her time angling it so that he could see the whole room. In the kettle, she boiled water for tea. Chamomile, as always, no sugar. The familiar scent filled the space. By then, the old garden unit no longer smelled musty or forgotten. Now it smelled of lemon oil, clean cotton sheets, and something else, quiet defiance, woven into every surface. It was only after the sun had dipped well below the horizon that Liam finally noticed. He appeared at the sliding door of the garden unit, knocking, confused. Elaine didn't rush to answer. When she finally slid it open, he stood there blinking at the transformation behind her. Made bed, dusted shelves, a reading nook already broken in, her pill organizer visible on the side table, its compartments full, untouched. "I'm moving in here," she said without drama, her tone steady, final. "You can't just do that," Liam exclaimed, his voice tight with frustration and disbelief. "I can," she said calmly, lifting a single sheet of paper she'd been carrying all day, folded but uncreased. "Co-ownership, remember? I have legal access to the entire property, every square foot, including this unit." Liam stared at the document, his mouth open, grasping for arguments. "Rachel said—" Elaine didn't give him the chance to finish. "Rachel says many things," she interrupted, her voice even. His gaze fell to the notarized paper in her hand, their signatures side by side, dated and stamped with the notary's seal. It wasn't a threat. She didn't need threats. The truth was enough. "This is no longer your concern, Liam," she said, with a gentle but immovable firmness. "I have my space, and I intend to keep it." Rachel's reaction didn't take long. Within the hour, drawers upstairs were being slammed with unnecessary force. There were angry footsteps pacing back and forth, muttered accusations echoing down into the garden through the vented windows. "She's dangerous. She's isolating herself. This is what happens before people spiral. We can't just let her take over the house." Elaine didn't rise to the bait. She simply sat in her chair, sipped her warm tea, and quietly opened her notebook. With methodical care, she began writing. Every word, every time, every phrase Rachel shouted, logged and time-stamped, for her records. By midweek, her garden unit had its own private Wi-Fi network, a separate router installed by a technician, under her name and billed to her directly. A discreet internal camera was already functioning, hidden behind a potted aloe vera that sat on the bookshelf near the door. Her doctor's number was written on a card by the landline. Her lawyer's contact information was taped to the inside of a cabinet door, easily accessible, and her medications, every bottle, were stored inside a small steel safe she had kept since before Liam was born. The key hung from a thin chain around her neck, tucked inside her shirt. Elaine didn't need anyone's permission. She had built her own space on her own terms. And this time, she wasn't leaving. 3 nights later, a knock interrupted her evening reading. Not the frantic pound of Rachel's tantrums. This knock was sharp, professional. She opened the door and found 2 individuals on the porch, ID badges clipped to their jackets. "Elaine Parker?" one asked. "We're from Adult Protective Services. We're here for an unannounced wellness check." Behind them, Rachel stood stiffly in the hallway, arms folded, eyes gleaming with feigned concern. Elaine smiled warmly. "Come in, officers." As they stepped into her garden suite, the first APS agent paused, eyes sweeping the room. Fresh linens, organized meds, ownership papers framed on the wall. Elaine handed them a flash drive. "What's this?" one asked. She looked over his shoulder at Rachel and said gently, "My side of the story." And then she closed the door. They thought they'd win the narrative, but the visitor saw right through them. The living room looked deceptively warm, sunlight spilling across a vase of forced tulips, the faint scent of lemons and wood polish lingering in the air. But the tension sat thick, sour, and motionless. Even the air felt hesitant. Elaine sat straight-backed in her armchair, legs crossed neatly, a tray of lemon cookies untouched beside her. Across from her, two representatives from Adult Protective Services reviewed a manila folder thick with printouts, photographs, and one USB drive labeled in handwritten ink. Footage, April to June. Rachel leaned against the kitchen island, arms crossed tight, a smile too wide plastered on her face. Of course, you understand elderly minds can get easily confused. I try my best, but it's hard managing both work and care. The older woman from APS didn't look up from the document in her lap. "Miss Elaine Parker is listed as co-owner of the property, correct?" Rachel's smile twitched. "Oh, technically, yes, but that was years ago. It was just to qualify for the loan. She's not actually. Co-ownership implies equal residential rights regardless of age." Rachel swallowed. Elaine, without a word, reached into the side pocket of her floral cardigan and pulled out her reading glasses. She placed them carefully on her nose, opened a slim folder, and slid a page across the coffee table. "My latest blood pressure readings," she said, voice calm but laced with steel. Compared to 2 months prior, the second APS rep, a younger man with close-cropped hair, leaned forward and scanned the graphs. His eyes widened slightly. "You've had a significant spike in systolic numbers." Elaine nodded. "Correlated exactly to the weeks Rachel handled my medications." Rachel let out a forced laugh. "Handled? I was helping. She gets forgetful sometimes. She takes them twice." The older APS rep now raised her head. "We've reviewed the footage, Miss Reynolds." A full beat of silence. Rachel's face flushed red. "What footage?" Elaine's eyes didn't blink. "The one where you dumped my pills behind the trash bin, 3 nights in a row." The tray of lemon cookies sat between them, a silent peace offering from a woman who was done playing nice. Liam entered from the hallway looking like he hadn't shaved in days. His voice was tight. "Rachel, what the hell is this?" "Don't," she snapped. "You weren't here." "I saw the footage too, Rachel." The APS worker nodded once, confirming. "Given the evidence and your ongoing manipulation, including forged brochures and altered prescriptions, this household will now be marked for formal investigation. Rachel Reynolds, your actions have triggered a mandatory inquiry into elder abuse." Rachel backed away from the island. "This is insane. She's doing this on purpose. She wants us out." Elaine stood now, steady, still. Her voice, however, cut through the air with the precision of a scalpel. "You wanted to teach me a lesson, Rachel, about dependence, about silence, about knowing when my time was up." She paused, hands steady at her sides. "Let me return the favor." Later that evening, after the APS team left, Rachel stormed around the house like a caged animal. Liam sat in the dim dining room, nursing a glass of water and shame. Elaine had already returned to her garden unit, where fresh chamomile steeped in a ceramic cup. The door was locked. Her camera light blinked softly. The wind shifted, the quiet of justice settling in. The next morning, a white envelope lay on the main doorstep. Rachel ripped it open, eyes darting. Her breath hitched. A court summons, Elaine Parker versus Rachel Reynolds. Hearing on fraud, medical neglect, and cohabitation rights. Mandatory appearance required. Rachel dropped the paper. Elaine, from behind her garden window, watched her kneel. And for once, Rachel was the one who looked confused. "They brought paperwork. I brought proof." The courtroom was cold, not in temperature, but in mood. Polished floors, sterile walls, and the low hum of an overworked ventilation system gave the space a sense of practiced indifference. No sympathy, no comfort, just process. Elaine sat in the front row beside her attorney, back straight, hands folded calmly in her lap. Her silver hair was neatly pinned, a navy blue shawl hung over her shoulders like armor.